Welcome to Asian Review. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. Our show today, the challenges of the rebalance. And our guest joining us from New York City via telephone is Mr. Sean King. Sean is Senior Vice President of Park Strategies, a consulting firm located on Park Avenue in New York City. He has really extensive knowledge and experience in Asia. He worked for the U.S. Department of Commerce as a top Asia advisor for some time, led trade missions to various points in the Far East. Also worked in Capitol Hill in the Senator D'Amato's office when the senator was serving in the U.S. Senate. He is frequently quoted in various media and often appears on various TV shows to render his advice and insight about Asia. Welcome to Asian Review.
Thank you very much, Bill, and thanks for the kind introduction. But there's no greater honor than to appear on Asian Review, so thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you. We're glad to have you. We're glad to have you back. This is your second appearance on the show. I think the last one was just about a year ago.
It was right after the Taiwan 7-1 local election, so it's almost my one-year anniversary on Asian Review.
Right, that's great. Well, let's get right into it here. The rebalance. Okay. What do you see as the challenge facing the U.S. to rebalance at the current moment?
I think the challenge is keeping it going, because it definitely is President Obama's thing, and my fear is that the next president doesn't sustain it. Not necessarily because he or she doesn't agree with it, although Hillary Clinton would be certain to keep it going since it's pretty much her idea in the first place. But just because there's so many competing issues out there. You know, we talk about Asia, it's our passion, but just to take a moment, I'd like to express my condolences to the French people and anybody touched by that. That's just a horrible, inhumane outrage. And the next president's going to have to deal with ISIS every day and Russia and Ukraine. So the question is, where does Asia fit into his or her calculus? And, Republicans, I'm a Republican, and Republicans often talk tough on China, but too often when they get into the White House, they kind of take their eye off China. And let's be honest, the rebalance is kind of an anti-China move by the U.S. and Asia.
Absolutely, absolutely. No matter what people say, I remember, this will really put a focus on it, Richard Armitage a couple years ago in the Herald International, I believe it was the Herald International, or its successor, wrote an op-ed piece that said, let's not make any bones about it. It's about China. Exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. So, Bush 43 came in talking very tough on China and said we would do whatever we would to defend Taiwan in 2001 when lecturing at a Beijing university. But then after September 11th, he realized he needed China to sort of look the other way and lean on Pakistan so we could go into Afghanistan. And then you had Chen Shui-bian in Taiwan, who was mucking things up a bit for him. So he kind of said, forget Taiwan, I'm gonna look toward China. He let China host these phony six-party talks with North Korea. So, and it was Nixon, who stabbed Chiang Kai-shek in the back by going to Beijing and seeing Mao in 1972. Meanwhile, it was a Democratic Congress in 1979 that passed the Taiwan Relations Act. It was Clinton who defended Taiwan in 1996 in the Chinese Missile Crisis by sending the 7th Fleet in. Now you have Obama with the pivot. So the traditional left-right fault lines in American politics often don't play out.
Well, let me jump in here because you're saying something real interesting, because traditionally Republicans are supposed to be more friendly to towards Taiwan than Democrats, but even though you're a Republican, you're saying, hey, well, it's at least 50-50, or maybe the Democrats are a little bit more supportive of Taiwan than the Republicans.
Well, that's hard to say because I think they're both bad whenever they get in the White House, except for Obama, who's been neutral to good. And
neutral to good?
Yeah. And, I think Taiwan is more of a legislative versus executive branch dynamic. And that is...
Oh, that's a good point.
members of Congress, regardless of party, it just happens to be that Democrats have more often been in the majority, so they've had a chance to author more of this legislation, especially in the 70s when we switched our embassy in China from Taipei to Beijing. And it's important to remember that we did not de-recognize Taiwan and recognize China. We de-recognized Taipei as the voice of all China and switched it to Beijing, which is a whole other story for another day, which is also the root of what the Taiwan election is all about.
That's a very good point. We officially de-recognize Taiwan, but then unofficially recognize them in such a manner that the way we unofficially recognize them was pretty hard to distinguish from official recognition.
Yeah, and but I think who's ever in the executive branch practices a more realpolitik and thinks they need China for big picture items like fights against terror, splitting off the communist world into Soviet and Chinese spheres. And then Republicans are too often driven by big business. And I think Republicans talk tough on Capitol Hill and the campaign trail, but then once they get in, up top, they have big corporate donors with plants in Guangzhou and say, listen, on this Dalai Lama stuff, you could just ease up a bit. I got a big conference coming up.
No, you're making a good point, and I think that's a very fair point. And it needs to be said: is American business drives a lot of China policy.
Unfortunately, yes. And so, where in the Cold War with the Soviet Union, there was no business to be made in the Warsaw Pact. Business was with us against the Soviet Union and its allies on human rights and whatnot. But in the case of Asia, often its business is the more China-friendly of the American electorate. And then you have people like human rights groups and environmental groups which are actually more anti-China, which is, totally counterintuitive when you look at the American political spectrum. But I would say it's really Congress tends to support Taiwan, and then the executive branch tends to not need Taiwan as much or need China more, so they don't need the irritation of Taiwan. And Republicans tend to lean a little bit in Beijing's way because of big business. And Obama really, obviously he sees big business as the enemy in many ways. He's close with labor. I think he was genuinely offended by China's crackdown on Google, and there were many Google executives in the White House in the first term. And then the way that China at least vetoed the resolution on the Cheonan sinking by North Korea, that South Korean corvette, in 2010.
Sure.
I think that was it, and he said, that's it. Asia pivots on. China, you had your chance. It's over. And
Okay.
I think that's where we are.
Good. Then let me challenges to the rebalance. Now, one challenge that seems to me, and actually you put your finger right on it, is the U.S. has so many global commitments, and as much as I think it would like to get out of the Middle East, it's just not going to happen, at least for the foreseeable future.
Especially not this week.
As a matter of fact, it might get in a little bit more deeper.
Yeah.
The resources question, budget challenges in Washington, how are they impacting America's ability to carry out the security part of the rebalance?
I think that's part of it, but not the biggest part of it. I think the biggest part is just focus and stamina. China wears you down. It's not a sudden, direct confrontation. It's a gradual wear down, and they have such size, and they're in the region, we're not. And there's so many reasons to give in to China on business, and so many of our allies are tempted and sometimes do cross to the other side, that it's really hard to keep people focused, especially when our administrations change every 4 or 8 years and theirs don't. I mean, China may have a new leader, but it's basically the same party with the same ideology, and they take advantage of that turnover in our system and try to play one administration off the other, plus the revolving door in Congress. So I think the real challenges are focus and stamina and staying with it.
It seems to me there's another challenge here in the rebalance. Now, during the Cold War, the style of leadership affected by the United States was, okay, guys, you're all with me, right? Follow me. And for the most part, countries were following. In Asia, China wasn't a factor. It wasn't a security factor. The business opportunities hadn't mushroomed yet. And now, we have countries in Asia saying to us, hey, you know what, like Singapore, hey, you want to be a power in Asia, you better stay here and make more of a commitment to the area. Okay. And other countries with whom we have alliances, for the most part, are saying the same thing. And other countries are sort of troubled by China, and they want the U.S. security commitment. But, you know, it seems to me that if we look at all these countries and if we place them on a sliding scale of 1 to 10 on their commitment to the rebalance, I would put, say, like Japan at 10. I think Japan's totally committed, or as much committed to the rebalance as it could be.
Right.
If I look at other countries, well, clearly, maybe these aren't great examples, but Laos and Cambodia, they're 0. They're in China's pocket all the way.
Right.
But then if we look at some other countries, you know, like, okay, Vietnam. Now, Vietnam seems to want to warm up to the United States. It certainly doesn't like what China's doing in the South China Sea. Yet there's a strong pro-China faction in the Vietnamese Communist Party.
Mm-hmm.
So I give, on my scale, I probably should have made a chart of this, Vietnam a 7 at the best. A 7 at the best.
I give him a 6.
You give him a 6. Thailand is very iffy. Thailand, you know, it seems to me was a very close U.S. ally, especially during the Vietnam War.
They were a 6 like 2 years ago. Now I give them a 4.
I was going to give them a 5. Okay.
You're too nice, Bill. I think it's all that sunshine in Hawaii.
Okay.
Too generous. You need some cold-hearted New York attitude.
Okay. Singapore. Okay. We base, you know, some very high-tech naval vessels in Singapore. The Singaporean government, you know, Lee Kuan Yew, when he was alive, he was really advocating a U.S. position in Asia, security position. But then again, they're very worried about their relationship with China. I'm really not sure where to place Singapore on the scale. Now, you spent some time in Singapore. Where would you place them?
Well, it's funny. You talk about the sliding scale. You make me think of regression analysis. I feel like I'm back in business school.
Okay. This is statistics
I'm going to do you
class.
one better. I'm going to give Cambodia a Laos. I'm going to give them each a 1 only because I want to put North Korea at 0.
I didn't even think about those guys.
Yeah. Singapore's interesting because, you know, on terror, no one's closer to us in Asia than Singapore. And they were the first Southeast Asia, one of the first countries on earth to recognize, Israel was one of the first countries to recognize Singapore as a free nation. And they support us in Iraq and Afghanistan. We have a free trade agreement, a naval facility. And obviously they're very, even though they don't have a claim in the South China Sea, freedom of navigation and commerce is very important to them. Yet they are an ethnic Chinese run government that doesn't like there to be a full free-for-all when it comes to society.
Good point.
So some people have said Singapore is a model for China politically going far. I mean, going forward, Singapore is really a suburb of Shanghai at best. I don't see the connection. And the Singapore military is trained in Taiwan for many years, yet they're strong backers of the One China policy and take pride in hosting the 1993 talks and then the Xi-Ma meeting last weekend. Singapore is a funny one. It's kind of an outlier because it's big in terms of trade and sort of military toward the Middle East, but within Asia, it really defines itself as neutral. So Singapore almost doesn't fit in anywhere.
5, 6, 8. I mean, it's very. We're gonna have to take a break here.
I'm gonna give it an even 5, just because I just don't think it applies.
Okay, well we came out pretty much the same on that one. I said 5, you said 5.
I give it an 8, and I'm going to give Philippines a 9.
Okay, I was going to come back to Philippines, and then we'll come back to Australia, but we got to take a break, and we'll see you in about 1 minute. You're watching Asian Review. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. My guest today, joining us by phone from New York City, is Sean King. Don't go away. We're going to be right back.
Aloha, this is Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroots Institute, and I want to thank you for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. We are delighted to be partners with ThinkTech because it gives us the opportunity to bring to you a show every week on Monday at 2 o'clock p.m. called Ehana Kako. Ehana Kako means let's work together, because we believe that Hawaii will be a better place when everybody works together. And in what way? Well, at the Grassroots Institute, we research 3 basic areas, and we invite guests to come on board from across the country, the state, and the nation to talk about a better economy, a better government, a better society. Now, aren't those things we all want? Indeed. If you'd like to have the latest research in terms of public policy, as well as ways in which we can build a better government, economy, and society, then tune in every Monday on ThinkTech Hawaii at 2 o'clock p.m. for our fascinating guests on Ehana Kako. Let's work together. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute, and I'll see you then. Aloha.
Welcome back to Asian Review. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. My guest today is Sean King, Senior Vice President of Park Strategies, an international consulting firm which does a lot of business, a lot of consulting in East Asia. Sean has years and years of experience in dealing with Asian affairs. He was a top advisor in the U.S. Department of Commerce for a while. Also worked in the office of then Senator D'Amato on Capitol Hill, and is often quoted in various leading publications, as well as appearing on a number of TV shows to give his views on Asia. We're talking about the challenges that the rebalance to Asia faces, and we're looking at individual countries in Asia and trying to determine, trying to be scientific about it, actually putting them on a sliding scale of 1 to 10 as to what degree do they really buy into this rebalance. Let's talk about the Philippines here. Now, the Philippines is obviously outraged, I think it's fair to say, about China's land grabbing.
Right.
And has really miffed the Chinese by taking the case to the International Court in The Hague. Yeah, and on the other hand, yes, we do have defense commitments to the Philippines, and they have some nice bases left over from an era when the U.S. had bases at Clark and Subic. Kind of sensitive about having U.S. ships berthed there. They don't mind visiting rights, pulling in for repairs. But just to what degree would you say the Philippines are into the rebalance? Where would you put them on our scale?
I put them at a 9, and I might even put them higher if they weren't so dysfunctional at homes at the time. But I mean, the Philippines is not a model of, well-run government or well-run country. There's a lot of corruption, a lot of dysfunction. I mean, it's kind of a crazy,
weak,
dirty
too,
place at times. But I mean, they're good people. It's democracy. They're with us in the war on terror, and maybe they're rethinking having kicked us out in 1992 at this point.
I think that's a valid point.
China's Scarborough Shoal land grab, or whatever, has become the sort of case study of the South China Sea, and good for them going to The Hague like they do. So I put them very high on the list, and all the candidates, we'll see who wins, and hopefully they stay with us on these issues. And it's interesting that when Joko was in Washington a few weeks ago, Indonesia,
Joko,
which has always been on the fence, the Indonesian leader, who's always been on the fence, he said, and I'm not sure Indonesia's going to follow through on this because they don't follow through on a lot of things, but he said that he wants to join TPP in a round 2, and then last week they threatened to follow the Philippine route on arbitration.
I saw that.
If China doesn't get off their back in the South China Sea. So China's sharp elbows are coming back to hurt them.
So, okay, Indonesia, where would we put that? I would have given them maybe a 5 or 6. Okay.
A week or two ago, but based on what Joko's been saying, I'd say now 6, 5, 7. The problem with Indonesia is follow through. So I give them like a minor bump, but I'll believe it when I see it.
Okay. We've got a lot to talk about here, so let's move on. Let's talk about a couple of other key countries. Australia, I put them at 10. What about you?
I put them at a 10 and a 9 maybe, just because they've had changing governments, and now you have a government that's focused on climate change. And, people are talking about climate change, whatever you think of that issue, usually they kind of take their eye off military stuff. So I'll wait to see. And remember, Julian Gillard, the opposition, the now opposition party, the Asia pivot was launched when the other party in Australia was in power. And it was Obama's speech at the Australian Parliament in Canberra that officially launched the Asia pivot. So again, that's another place where party doesn't mean that much, although she was a Kevin Rudd's party, and he's the biggest China friend ever in Australian history now at the Asia Society. So again, party identification really doesn't mean a lot in these things.
That's
but I put Australia very high.
Okay, let's talk for just a second about New Zealand. Is New Zealand?
Right.
I mean, relations between New Zealand and the United States were estranged for quite a number of years.
Right.
I understand.
Nukes on the boats.
They're a lot better now.
Yep.
But I'm not sure if New Zealand really buys into the pivot or
No,
the rebalance.
They, in spite of themselves, they do, because China looks at the eastern perimeter of Asia and they see New Zealand as a U.S.-friendly democracy, walling them into the Pacific. So in China's mind, it feeds their paranoia of a Western encirclement, even though New Zealand's not really part of it. Also, let's remember New Zealand was one of the original 4 members of TPP before we even got into it, back when it was called the P4. So again, in spite of themselves,
that's a really good point.
in spite of themselves giving birth to TPP and making China feel encircled, they are, without knowing it, part of the pivot. But consciously, I don't think they see themselves as part of it. I give them another NA. and it's sort of like Singapore, but for different reasons. I just don't think they apply in how we view the pivot.
Okay, let's move on to India.
Very important.
Okay. I don't know exactly where to put him. I put him someplace between 8 and 10.
I'm going to give him an 8 or 9. And, the question is whether or not India is really Asia. But more and more, I think it is becoming. And India is drawn into the pivot because Pakistan is friends with China. So any friend of theirs is suspect at best. But India is very pro-democracy. Since Bush in 2005, they've become very pro-U.S., buying a lot of military equipment from us, even though they voted against us like 80% of the time during the Cold War and used to buy MiGs from the Soviet Union. Bush helped turn around that relationship. Obama's kept it going. The Mumbai terror attacks put them firmly in the U.S. camp. And Modi is a Hindu Indian nationalist who's very suspicious of China.
Bush. Yeah. Hey, let's talk about, let me see, I got one other person here. One other thing I want to talk about. Before we go into Korea, now Taiwan. Now Taiwan is not officially in the rebalance, but lots of people, I think, in the Ministry of National Defense would like to be. Yet it's got all these business connections with China. On the other hand, it wants to be in Pacific and RIMPAC. Can we give Taiwan any kind of score on this scale, or is it just a little premature?
I'm going to give them an NA again. Not applicable until further notice. And, I think that they were under Ma moving closer to the mainland. And it was actually the quiet relations between Taiwan and the mainland that I think gave Obama some room to launch the pivot, because he didn't have to worry about this becoming about Taiwan. So long as Taiwan was quiet under Ma toward the mainland, I think it gave Obama the time and space to launch the pivot. And now a green Taiwan under DPP is ready to join it. But had Chen Shui-bian been president at the time Obama launched the pivot, he probably would have jumped on it, overplayed it, and then it would have been all about Taiwan. So in some ways it helped the pivot that Ma was in power then, because Taiwan wasn't a part of it. But I think it can join and be a part of it, at least in spirit, when Tsai Ing-wen is president next year.
Let's move on to Korea. Of course, we're talking about South Korea here, just to make it absolutely clear. As we were talking about as we were discussing the other day on the phone, I feel a little annoyed with South Korea right now. And, it seems to me that they always overplay their hand. It seems to me that I did be just real candid here, is they have this sensitivity about Japan. They think that the United States shows more preference in its relationships in Asia to Japan than it does to Korea, and Korea should be treated as an equal partner. And to be realistic, that's all well and good, but frankly, Japan's a more important country. It's got more financial resources. It's a bigger security power, even though its military is dressed up as self-defense forces. I'm sort of further annoyed that Korea has taken such a standoffish attitude towards TPP, whereas it was really pushing on the U.S. for the finalization of the Korean-USA Chorus, free trade agreement, which I wrote about on a few op-ed pieces supporting. And you know, I realize there's a generational difference in Korea. The older people tend to be more friendly towards the U.S. Because they remember the Korean War. Yeah, the younger generation is they didn't live through the Korean War. It's kind of almost irrelevant to them. And they, I suppose, could say, sort of tired of hearing about the U.S. all the time, have the U.S. held up as a model. Yet, when we try to give them back command of their troops, they don't want it. They're not ready for it. I mean, the Korean military, how many years has it been training? Has it been developing equipment? It's still weak in logistics and intelligence. It depends on the U.S. And I don't really think the defense of Korea is complete without the U.S. Without U.S. backing, because the U.S. has a lot more resources. Korea doesn't participate in the Proliferation Security Initiative because of sensitivities about North Korea. It's very skeptical about the THAAD, this high-powered anti-missile defense system the U.S. has, and fearing that their argument is, while the U.S. says that that's aimed against North Korea, the U.S. really wants to use it against China. On the other hand, isn't this supposed to be a mutual security treaty? Isn't it supposed to be some sort of like, we help you, you help us? On the other hand, some people would say, trying to look at it from the other side, that things like the Gwangju uprising have left a very bad taste in the mouth of Koreans. Even that happened a while ago. People don't forget that kind of stuff, especially young Koreans.
Especially Koreans.
Yeah.
Especially Koreans, period.
Koreans, period. Some would say, well, the whole U.S. policy in Korea is not designed to protect Korea, it's designed to protect Japan. And I don't know, maybe there's something to that, but you know, who was it that bailed South Korea out during the Korean War? The United States and the United Nations forces, most of which were American troops. I just don't think that Park Geun-hye is the president, very well as a president, and she's letting this this Korean sensitivity about Japanese, and I think she inherits a lot of this from her father's legacy, in my view, adversely impact her leadership. This lean to China, well, it's sort of like, well, you guys don't want to be friendly with us or treat us at the same level you treat Japan, we'll just sort of like chum it up with China. And there's business interests that drive that relationship too. But you know, I wonder, that sounds kind of negative, I realize, but I really kind of wonder, given the fact that the Koreans overplay their hand, what a unified Korea under Seoul would really be like. What kind of dimension would it add in Northeast Asia? Would it be a positive force, or would it be a country that would be constantly overplaying its hand and perhaps creating more problems than contributing to the solution of them?
Well, I mean, I get to that in a second on United Korea. On the pivot, I'd say...
So let's take a break right here and come back
okay.
to your answer, because this is something we don't want to stop in the middle of, okay? So we're going to take another break here. You're watching Asian Review. I'm your host. We're having a really good discussion with Sean King. He's given us a lot of things to think about here. Don't go away. We're going to be right back in 1 minute.
Aloha, this is Alice V. Hagen from ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. My show is a bi-weekly show on Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. We invite interesting people, entrepreneurs, fascinating leaders who contribute to the social economic well-being of our state. Please tune in to my show, Business Education Spotlight, ThinkTech Hawaii, bi-weekly, Thursday, 3 to 4 p.m. Aloha.
Aloha, my name is Josh Green. I'm a senator from the Big Island in the ER position. Every other Tuesday, I get to host a show here on the ThinkTech program about healthcare. We call it Healthcare in Hawaii. It's really enjoyable for me to bring other healthcare leaders from around the state to talk about our pressing issues. Hawaii has long been the health state, but we need to keep up the momentum, the inertia, and with your help and with your participation, we can come and share all of the big issues that are pressing day to day. Thanks for joining us every Tuesday, alternating weeks from 2 to 2:45.
Welcome back to Asia in Review. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. We're having a really good discussion here with Sean King, Senior Vice President of Park Strategies, located in New York City, right on Park Avenue. Been talking about challenges to the pivot. And we've gone through a number of Asian countries, and we tried to, very scientifically, I might add, place them on a continuum of 1 to 10 and determine just how much support they're rendering to the rebalance, how much have they bought into it. We're talking about Korea now, and Korea is traditionally a very close ally of the United States. We have a very strong alliance with them, but it seems like there's been distance created in the relationship. And of course, China would love to drive some sort of a wedge between Korea and the United States. In fact, I think one of the goals of foreign policy is to try to separate alliance countries with whom the United States has an alliance, try to drive a wedge in between them. And it seems to be pursuing this kind of strategy with South Korea. And also it seems technical and economic benefits with having a closer relationship to Korea. And Koreans have a lot of business interests in China. So Sean, what's your take on this?
Well, in some ways, Korea is a 10 in the Asia pivot because Obama had such a great relationship with Lee Myung-bak. He passed the Korea Free Trade Agreement. He also enlarged or increased the range of South Korean missiles that can shoot into North Korea. And I think the real
You're saying
US
Obama did that?
Yeah, Obama
Okay.
did that. The South Korean relationship has been very important, and it was the sinking of the Cheonan, which China refused to criticize. I think
Right.
that pushed Obama over the edge on the pivot. And it's just a great example of see what South Korea is, look what North Korea is. Obviously, our way is the right way. But the problem, if there is one with Korea, is that Korea is really only interested in Korean issues. And the term hermit kingdom is often misused for North Korea, but that was actually a term that outsiders trying to penetrate Korea in the 19th century coined for Korea as a whole. And Koreans see themselves as victimized, the shrimp among the whales, abused by neighboring powers, sometimes taken for granted by the United States, although they do greatly value the relationship. And they're really only interested in what anything means for Korea. They do not have an interest in Asia-wide issues.
Let me jump into here because you're making an important point. And let me just kind of paraphrase what you're saying and make sure that I understand what you're saying, and hopefully we'll help the audience out here. What I think you're saying is Korea is not really contributing much to regional security. Its security concerns are strictly Korea focused.
Yes, but their security concerns are so unique and so acute. By focusing on themselves, they do, by definition, contribute to regional security because it helps keep North Korea at bay and also stops any hegemonic expansion by China through North Korea. So they're doing a great job on their own, but they don't see themselves as part of the bigger Asia picture, which is ironic because they're more free trade dependent than anyone else. But like the way that India or Japan sees themselves as a trilateral partner with the U.S. in naval operations on the South China Sea, South Korea has no interest in that. If it doesn't affect Korea, they really don't care. And they wouldn't want to pick a fight with China because they think still that they can use China to bring down North Korea. But the more they rely on China, the more China knows it needs North Korea around for South Korea to think it needs it. So we're sort of going around in circles here, but South Korea is being teased by China thinking it's going to solve North Korea for them, but it won't because
Excellent
China
point.
cannot yet live with a U.S. ally on its border. And I know Koreans can be a little, prickly at times and not team players like Japan or the Philippines when it comes to Asia policy. But if there's any opportunity for a united Korea under Seoul, we have to take it, if only for the lives of the people in North Korea who suffer every day. And I have tremendous faith in Koreans, and it's going to be a democracy. It'll be united. Where it goes with the U.S. versus China, I don't know. But anytime 23 million people can suddenly choose their own government on China's doorstep, I think it's a net positive. So I hope there's a united Korea, and it can't come soon enough.
That's good. That's good. If it does come, I think it's about 20 years in the offing.
I mean, we've been predicting the demise of the Kim regime for, who knows how long. It's all in China's hands. I mean, there's no point in even looking at this palace intrigue in Pyongyang. North Korea will fall when China lets it. That's all it is. Just like the Berlin Wall fell when Gorbachev told Honecker he would no longer back him. So sadly, this issue is out of Koreans' hands. It's a China power play at this point.
Interesting. It seems to me when we talk about challenges to the rebalance here, we have about 10 minutes left, I suppose. It really requires a new style of U.S. leadership, and a very flexible style of leadership, whereas sometimes we need to be out front. Sometimes we need to, as some people say, lead from the rear. Some issues, we want to stay away from, like territorial issues in the South China Sea, land issues. We need to be very flexible to make this rebalance come off.
Flexible, but also firm.
Okay.
And
okay.
Whatever gripes and beefs I have with Obama in other parts of the world, I think he's been good on Asia, and I think he has not been swayed by big business, not been suckered in by China. And Hillary had a lot to do with this behind the scenes. I hope if a Republican wins, they uphold the Obama policy in Asia. I know Hillary will. I think he's stuck with it. He's done it in a restrained, calm, but firm way. Again, we don't take a position on the various disputes, but we just say they should be ruled, governed by a rule of law, and also we believe in free and open navigation. And, we did have the ship pass through that area a few weeks ago, and now the bombers flew through too. And people say they wanted more from Obama sooner. Well, we don't know all that was going on behind the scenes. And the fact is we did it. We've done it twice. China didn't overreact. It was done with bringing our allies on board. Most people in the region support what we did. So the fact is he did it. And I like the way Obama's gone about this, especially hand-in-hand with TPP and the Chorus Free Trade Agreement, even though neither of them were entered into on his watch. But he saw they were good and has adopted them as his own.
TPP, let's talk about that. I'm not sure just how much time we have left, but we're sort of getting down near the end. TPP is the economic piece of the rebalance.
Right.
Okay. Where are we
Didn't
on
start
that?
out that way, but that's the way it's ended up.
Is it going to make it?
Justin Trudeau, he says he's going to pass it in Canada, and most Asian countries, they're going to pass it because either they're not democracies or they have such massive majorities like Japan, it doesn't matter. The U.S. right now would be the one ratification wild card, but I think most Republicans support it. They know that the senatorial math does not favor Republicans in 2016. So even if Republicans elect a president, chances are good there's going to be a Democratic Senate. And they're definitely not going to pass it, especially if you have a Republican president.
So you're saying is they better hurry up and pass it?
Right. Otherwise, it's not going to get through. And
Okay.
I think they will, because I think enough of their backers support it, and they support the principle of free trade, even though somebody like Orrin Hatch is not happy on the pharmaceuticals. But I think they realize it's better with it than without it, and it'll go through.
Okay, we're down to about 4 minutes, maybe a little less than 4 minutes. Another thing that occurs to me is that the TPP doesn't pass for some reason, then the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership is probably put into jeopardy as well.
Well, that's in jeopardy anyway, because, Europe is kind of slow and boring. Again, all my friends in Sweden, you heard that right. Most people don't even know that's going on, and there's no real national security element to it. It's not like Russia's trying to sign these people up into a rival pact. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have much hope for that anyway. But whatever hope there was, without TPP, there's no motivation for that.
Okay, let me ask you this question. We're probably down to about 2 minutes now. And this is a question I've asked some of my guests recently because it's interesting to see how everybody responds, and I think our audience probably benefits from it as well. Often when I'm in China, and I go around and I talk to Chinese scholars or Chinese researchers, they often ask me, why is it that you Americans want to have a position in Asia? Why is it? How would you respond to that question?
First of all, the United States is a Pacific nation. Most Asian countries want the U.S. there. And I would ask Chinese, why do you want to have a position in Africa?
Touche. Touche. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, you know, your part about Asia is very similar to what I say, and yeah, you know, countries in the area want us here because your PLA is bullying other countries, smaller, less powerful countries, and they're looking to us for protection. You guys are not very sensitive to the experiences with imperialism that countries in Southeast Asia have. You talk about your 100 years of shame at the hands of foreigners as though it only happened to you.
Which the United States didn't do, by the way. That was Europeans and Japanese.
That's right.
We were China's ally.
I know, and
at that
actually,
time.
I point out to them in the 1800s. I think it was around 1880 or so. We had the open door policy, which really sought to limit the inroads of Western imperialism, Europeans, and you know, we helped to keep China together.
Right, and it was we against Churchill, who wanted China to be a post-World War II partner, and it was the Gettysburg Address that inspired Sun Yat-sen, not Das Kapital.
Right,
America and China
right.
have been friends for centuries. It's just this whole problem with the Communist Party that we have.
Quick word about the upcoming Taiwan presidential and legislative elections, and I'm sorry to do this, but it's going to have to be pretty quick because we're down to a minute.
Tsai Ing-wen will win. Question now is, with Eric Chu at the top, will it be enough for the KMT to hold the majority in the legislature?
What's your prediction?
I'm going to say it goes green, both legislature and I think the Ma's meeting with Xi looks like a desperate, you know, cynical gamble. And, you know, Eric Chu was in D.C. last week, but hardly anybody even noticed he was here.
Yeah,
So
you know, I don't think
all.
it's going to help. I haven't seen any polling information. He just went back to Taiwan yesterday, right? I haven't.
Yeah.
And we should wait to see what polls say, but I have a sense it's not going to help him at all. It might even hurt him.
And if the Blues do hold the legislature, nothing's going to happen for 4 years. So,
You know, I think, too, I think we're seeing a change in leadership in the KMT. We definitely saw a change of leadership, the replacing of the old generation with a new generation in the DPP, and I think we're going to see that in the KMT also. If Wang Jinping should somehow become party chair, this could be quite interesting.
wouldn't that be funny, considering what Ma tried doing to him in September 13th? I mean, he is a wily character, talking about having the last laugh.
Turnabout's fair play.
Yep.
Sean, thank you very much for joining us. It was great
I
to
join
talk to you.
myself
You
every
had some
day, Bill.
really great things to say, some very insightful things to say, and I'm sure that the audience as well and myself benefited from your the time that you spent with us.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
You bet.
Aloha.
Aloha. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for watching. This is Bill Sharp at Asian Review. We'll see you right here next week. Oh, same time, 4 p.m.